Welcome to the Kemper Old Boy Network podcast. I'm your host, David Flores. This is a podcast where we share interesting stories about Kemper Military School and where we interview old boys about their time at Kemper. Our goal is to create and archive the memories and stories of our beloved school. So, after 150 years, there's a whole lot of history behind our school, and we thought it'd be a good idea to dig into the archives and to find some interesting stories to share on the podcast. This week, we're going back to the 1950s to share a story about one of the highest paid kidnapping ransoms in American history and to tell you how it's tied to Kemper. This story is about the Bobby Greenlease kidnapping back in 1953. So here's some background. Multimillionaire Robert Greenlease made his fortune introducing GM cars to the Midwest. He had dealerships all the way from Texas up to South Dakota. And made a lot of money doing it. At the time of the kidnapping, he was 65 years old. Bobby was born in 1947, and he was 6 years old when he got kidnapped. So the abduction and subsequent murder of Bobby happened in September of 1953. A guy named Carl Hall and his cohort, Bonnie Hetty, kidnapped Bobby from Notre Dame de Sion, a Catholic school located in Kansas City. The kidnappers were apparently they were the alcoholics, probably had some drug addiction issues, and they were living together in St. Joseph. In the early 1930s, and this is where Kemper is tied in. So back in the early 30s, Hall had attended Kemper with Bobby's adopted older brother. His name was Paul Robert Greenlease, who was an old boy. And so apparently Hall for years had planned to victimize his former classmates' family because they were wealthy. He knew there was a lot of wealth there, and he had been planning this caper for some time. So the way it went down was that the lady, Miss Hetty, she went to Bobby's school, and she persuaded a nun that she was Bobby's aunt, and told her that Bobby's mother had a heart attack and they needed to get him over to see her. So she took Bobby away. Apparently Bobby was a trusting kid, 6 years old. So he leaves with her, and it turns out, they abducted him and her and Hall. They ended up taking Bobby back to Johnson County in Kansas, where Hall shot and killed him. They then took his body and they buried him behind Hetty's apartment in St. Joseph. So after the murder, Hall and Hetty message Bobby's father and get him, they demanded and got him to give them $600,000, which in today's dollars is roughly $5.7 million. And so at the time, it was the largest ransom that had ever been paid out in the United States. So, he was desperate. He didn't call the cops, didn't call the FBI. He paid the ransom. And so, they end up taking the money and they take off to St. Louis, where they try to kind of come up with an alibi. So once they're in St. Louis, Hall takes off and leaves Hetty in a hotel room. And he goes and gets with some criminal element there in St. Louis. So he ends up with one of his associates named Sandra O'Day, and he's going to get her to fly to Los Angeles and mail a letter, that he had written, trying to form an alibi that he was in Los Angeles at the time. But what happened was that Miss O'Day caught a glimpse of the money, and apparently Hall had been flaunting large amounts of money around, and she brought it to the attention of the cops. And so the cops went and arrested Hall, and in his trying to not get implicated, he implicates Hetty, which they go over to her house in St. Louis, her apartment, and they dig up the body in the backyard. And so they bring her in, and she ends up, of course, turning herself on Hall. And so they're both eventually arrested. and prosecuted. Both were had indictments and were prosecuted in December of 1953, and they were executed together in Missouri in the gas chamber. Just interestingly enough, Hetty was only one of 2 women since 1865 that were executed by federal authorities. The other one was Ethel Rosenberg, the Soviet spy. So, that's the story of the abduction and murder of Bobby Greenlease, and how it's tied to Hall, who is the murderer, and he had attended Kemper with the young boy's older brother. It's just so interesting, the stories that come out, of 150 years of being a part of humanity, right? And so we just want to share some interesting stories with you. It's something maybe that you hadn't heard or you didn't know about that were tied to Kemper. And so that's just kind of the point of this podcast, is that we want to share some history, some stories. We want to share your stories. We want to make sure that we're interviewing old boys to capture their stories of their time at Kemper, just to keep the legacy alive of Kemper and all that she meant to all of us. Well, we have reached the end of another episode. We want to thank you for joining us on the Kemper Old Boy Network podcast. We appreciate each and every one of you. You can find us on the web at KemperOldBoyNetwork.com. Please be sure to register so we can keep you in the loop of all the latest events, episodes, and KOBN news. If you have a question, comment, or story that you'd like to share with us, make sure you give us a call at area code 660-596-6362. I'm your host, David Flores. Thank you, God bless you, and as always, stay non-quam, non-pratus.